Hello, my name is Neel and I welcome you back to the new episode of Around the World in 7 Days. You must be listening to the news of the Russia-Ukraine war almost on a daily basis now. Broadly, you must have understood the ABCD of this war. That is why, in today's episode, we will neither talk about why this war took place, nor will we discuss in which direction this war can go now. Today, we will talk about the timeline of this war. We will know the important developments from the beginning of this war till now. In this episode, we will also look at the major events of Russia-Ukraine relations from the formation of Soviet Union to its disintegration so that you can understand the closeness and then the distance which developed between these two countries. Actually, the relationship between Russia and Ukraine has never been stable since the very beginning. Sometimes there was bitterness, other times there was sweetness. In 1922, Ukraine became a founding country of the Soviet Union along with Russia. But after this comes the era of Russian dictator Joseph Stalin. The Soviet Union faced famine in the years 1932 and 1933 due to Stalin's policies. Millions of Ukrainians died because of this. Thereafter, hatred started taking root in the hearts of Ukrainians. The gap left behind was filled by the annexation of Western Ukraine by the Soviet Union in the 1940s. This way, gradually, Ukraine made up its mind to break its relations with Russia. And finally, Ukraine separated from the Soviet Union in the year 1991. But the matter does not end here. Actually, Russia had a large arsenal in Ukraine. It had the world's third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons at that time. But when Ukraine seceded from the Soviet Union, this arsenal goes into its possession. But due to the heavy pressure, in the year 1994, Ukraine handed over this arsenal to Russia and in return took a promise from Russia to respect its independence, sovereignty, and existing borders. This agreement is known as Budapest Memorandum. Apart from Russia and Ukraine, it was signed by the United States and the United Kingdom. In the year 2008, NATO summit was organized to expand the MAP, that is, Membership Action Plan for the membership of Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin registered his strong objection on this. He told the then US President George W. Bush that Ukraine is not a real nation, so it should not be given NATO membership. However, with the change of year, the atmosphere in Ukraine changed. The 2010 presidential elections changed the political course of Ukraine. Viktor Yanukovych won these elections. He won elections by promising to work towards closer relations with the European Union, but he actually worked by tilting Ukraine towards Russia. Due to heavy opposition, Yanukovych had to leave the country and eventually flee to Russia. The new leadership then became committed to tilting Ukraine towards Europe. But an incident in the year 2014 fueled the Russia-Ukraine fire once again. Russia annexed Crimea region of Ukraine that year. The Russian annexation of Crimea and pro-Russian violence in Ukraine had pushed the Ukrainian public sentiment towards the West. And all this together pushed the Ukrainian leadership even more strongly to join NATO and the European Union. Under these circumstances, in the year 2019, Volodymyr Zelensky became the president. Zelensky pushed hard to get Ukraine full NATO membership regardless of the Russian pressure. After this, Putin started increasing the number of Russian troops near the Ukrainian border. Eventually, on 24 February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Then Zelensky imposed martial law in Ukraine after the Russian attack. At the same time, he officially broke the diplomatic relations with Russia, and then the Ukrainian army started facing the Russian army. The turning point in this war was seen in the month of September when for the first time on September 11, 2022, the Ukrainian army was able to push back the Russians. After this action, Ukraine took back an area of more than 1,000 square miles from Russia. Further, on September 21, 2022, Putin outlined his plan to mobilize around 3 lakh troops to reclaim lost territory. It also included Russians who had crossed the age limit for military recruitment. As a result, on October 5, 2022, Russia annexed 4 regions of Ukraine, namely Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. In response, the US and its allies imposed sanctions on more than 1,000 Russian companies. However, these countries had already imposed many economic sanctions on Russia. Ukraine then demolished the Crimea Bridge on October 8, 2022, after these territories were out of its hands. This bridge helped Russia to have easy access to Crimea. However, Ukraine did not make any official claim to have demolished the bridge. Enraged by this, Russia started missile and drone attacks all over Ukraine. December also saw a historic moment when Zelensky visited the US. The visit was historic in itself because it was the first time after Winston Churchill, who was the then Prime Minister of England, that the president of a country had visited a foreign country when his country was fighting a war. The advantage of this tour was that the US announced military assistance of about $2 billion for Ukraine. It also included the Patriot missile system. The system was capable of shooting down Russian cruise missiles, short-range ballistic missiles, and its aircrafts. These actions strengthened the wings of Ukraine, but those wings got air when on January 25, 2023, Germany allowed Ukraine to get its decisive tanks, Leopard 2 tanks. These tanks have the ability to destroy Russia's T-90 tanks. America also did not lag behind in this matter and also sent its special tanks to Ukraine to counter the Russian tanks. One thing to note here is that the delivery of the Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine was a particularly big step for Germany, as Germany had been treading water as an ally of Ukraine since the start of war. But because of this decision, Germany came out of the curtain for the first time. All this was going on that about a month later, US President Joe Biden surprised the world, including Russia. Biden reached Ukraine on February 20th, 2023, a few days before the anniversary of the Russian attack. In this meeting, he said that after 1 year of Russia's attack, both democracy and Ukraine are standing together. However, in the end, beyond this timeline and after more than 1 year of this war, the reality is that both countries are still at war and world peace is still at stake. That's all for today's discussion. Let's note down today's question. The question is, the beginning of the 20th century marked a new chapter in the story of Russia-Ukraine conflict. Present your views in the light of this statement. That's all for today's discussion. See you in next episode. Till then, goodbye.